Welcome back. In the last video, we looked at how we set up a new stage in Adobe Animate, and we looked at what the toolbar does, some of the things on the right-hand side, our properties, and we looked at how to set up these things, how to get them back if we accidentally delete them, and how to add extra things to our screen if we wanted them. Now in this video, we're going to look at starting to build our first animation. We're going to use some of the tools on the left hand side here, and we're going to look at how these properties on the right hand side come into play as well. And we're going to cover the timeline down the bottom here. First, let's talk about animation. What is animation? It's the appearance of motion by slightly changing a static 2D image or even a 3D image and replaying those changes in quick succession. This quick succession and slight changes tricks the brain into seeing motion. And this is traditionally called frame by frame. Every frame, something changes on the screen, and when you play them back quickly enough, it tricks our brain into seeing something move. And this is how all animation is done. The method might change slightly. For example, 2D drawn animation is slightly different to claymation, but the process is the same. It is changing something slightly, taking a static image, and then playing through those images quickly. And that's what we're going to do today. We're going to make a frame by frame animation, nice and simple, and we're going to look at some of the tools that can be used in Adobe Animate to help us. And let's start off by making our thing we're going to animate, our object. Okay, we're going to start off nice and simple with a ball. What we're going to do, we're going to make a frame by frame animation of a ball bouncing. Okay, it's a start at the top of our screen, fall to the bottom, and bounce back to the top. Nice and simple. To get us started, we're going to draw a ball. On the left hand side here, we have our rectangle tool. Remember, if we long click that, we get other options. Come on. There we go, we get the other options, and we want the oval tool. And we can draw, we freehand it and we can draw a ball, whatever we want, or if we want something which is more symmetrical, we can hold down the shift key and that'll give us a perfect circle every time. And the same would be true for the rectangle tool. If we wanted to draw a perfect square, if we held down the shift key, that would give us a perfect square as well. My ball comes out as green. If I wanted to change that, I could go to my select tool up the top, select my ball, and over here in the properties, I can choose the fill. I can click on the colored box next to it, and I can choose from any of these colors, or I could make my own if I wanted. I'm going to go for, let's say, let's change it to a blue color. This blue will do. And likewise, if I wanted to change the background color as well, I could do that by selecting tool, clicking on the background. On the properties, then we have stage at the bottom here. Next to it, it's the default white background. Again, I can click this and I can change the color and find something that I want. Let's say, let's go for, that'll do. That's a nice color. There we go. So we've got a blue ball and this light green background. Okay, it's not all very important, but this is what we're going to be working with. Now down the bottom, before we get to our animation, let's talk about our timeline. Okay, we've got it split into several sections. We've got its own toolbar at the top here. We'll get to those as we use them. We have our layers on the left hand side, and then we have the timeline itself. These are where the frames and keyframes get added. And again, we'll cover those in just a moment. I want to talk about layers first. Each different layer you add will appear above or behind previous layers. Every object you add, you could add as a separate object. For example, if I wanted to add a square to my animation, I would add a new layer. So I've got my layer 1, which is my circle. In fact, what I'm going to do is I'm going to double click here and I'm going to name it. I'm going to call it circle. So I can keep track of it. The next one I want to do, I want to add a square. And to do this, I'm going to click the plus symbol in the top left-hand corner here, which says new layer. I click that. Now I have layer 2, which I'm going to add a square to. So I'm going to double click again and call this square. And I'm going to draw a square. So I'm going to go back to my oval tool this time, long click, get my rectangle. I'm going to hold down shift and draw a square. And at the moment it's the same color as my circle. I don't want that. I'm going to change that color again. I'm going to select tool, click, and then choose a different color. Let's go for, let's say red. So I've got a red square and a blue circle. And depending on their position in the layers list down here, the ones at the top appear closer to the screen. The ones at the bottom appear further back from the screen. What I mean by that is, since my square is on top of my circle, i.e. the square layer is above the circle layer, my square shape will appear in front of my circle shape. Okay? It's closer to the screen than my circle is. However, if I come down here and I swap them around, I take my circle and I move it above my square shape. Now my circle is closer to the screen than my square, which means my circle will appear in front of my square. Okay, that's not important for what we're going to be doing today, but just so you're aware, if you want things to appear in front or behind other things, switching their layers or the position of their layers is how it's done. Now I don't want the square, so I'm going to get rid of that. I'm going to delete that. And I'm going to delete the layer as well. So I'm going to click the layer and I'm going to drag it up to the bin, let go, and it's gone. You'll also notice when you hover over a layer, you get these two symbols. There's the eye with a line through it, and then there's the padlock. We can use these to hide things or to lock them. The eye with the line through it, if I click that, that hides everything on that particular layer. It's still there, I just can't see it. If I unclick it, it comes back. And the lock means that I lock it. If I click this, it now is highlighted. My circle is locked, and that means I can't make any changes. No matter what tool I use, I can't make any changes to not just the circle, but that entire layer. Okay, that's handy if you've got multiple things and you're happy with how one layer looks. You want to move on to the next layer, but you don't want to affect the previous layer you've been working on. So you lock it, move on to the next one. And that way you can't make any changes until you unlock it. Okay, now that we've covered layers, let's start with our animation. The first thing I want to do is I want my circle to start at the top of the screen, like so. And this is going to be my first keyframe. And you'll hear the different types of frames as we go. We have keyframes, frames, and blank keyframes. And a keyframe is used when something different happens, when something new happens or a change occurs, i.e. the next keyframe I'm going to have is my ball moving down. It's going to fall, so something has changed, therefore I'm going to use a keyframe. To do that, I come to my toolbar here, and I click this first icon here. It's a white square with a black dot inside it and a capital A in the top right hand corner. I click this and that adds a new keyframe. And what that will do in terms of mechanics is it copies everything from the previous keyframe. It sets it up in another keyframe, which I can use then to change. Okay. This is different to a frame because we use frames if we want to continue the previous keyframe. We use keyframes when changes occur. Doesn't matter if it's a change in shape, in position, something new is being added. Well, that's when we would use a keyframe. A frame is used if we just want to prolong that particular scene, or that particular frame, I should say. And what that would look like if instead of clicking insert new keyframe, since we have the little arrow at the bottom here, I long click and I insert the new frame. And you see the difference now. The first one is a keyframe. It's a gray box with a black circle in it. The second one is a new keyframe and a new frame. And what this is a longer gray box with a black dot. The black dot signifies a keyframe, the gray square signifies a frame. And that just means that my second and third frames are continuations of each other. So I would have a keyframe if I wanted to add something new, a frame if I wanted to keep the same thing happening over 2 or more frames. And then a blank keyframe, if I long click again, a blank keyframe is a gray box with an outline of a circle. This will just give me my background without anything in it. Just gives me my background back, and that's it. So no matter what I had in the previous keyframe, if I added a blank keyframe, it just gives me a blank stage, and that appears as a grayed out box with a circle in it. For what we're going to be doing today, we're only going to be using keyframes, but we'll see in future videos how important frames and keyframes are going to be. What I'm going to do is I'm going to right click on this blank keyframe. I'm going to click remove frames. I'm going to keep this second keyframe because we're going to use that one. And I'm going to go back to my auto insert here. It's set the blank keyframe. I don't want that. I'm going to set it back to keyframe. And that'll give me a new keyframe, which is okay because I'm going to need multiple keyframes for what we're about to do. Now, since we're using keyframes, that means something is going to change. And since my frame by frame animation is going to be my ball falling through the screen and then bouncing at the bottom, we need to change its position. At the moment, my frame 1, frame 2, and frame 3 is my ball in the same position every time. And I know which frame I'm on because every time I click on one, this number here changes. It tells me I'm on the 3rd frame, the F there. And it even tells me how many frames per second my animation is going to run in as well. Okay, let's get to moving. Here's the first one. Frame 1 starts at the top. I'm happy with that. Frame 2, we're going to move it down a little bit. That's okay. Frame 3, we're going to move it down a little bit more. I'm going to add a new keyframe, move it down, add a new keyframe, move it down, new keyframe, move it down, new keyframe, move it down. Okay, I'm about halfway through and I want to test this. I want to see what this looks like. And there's a couple of ways we can do this. The first way, we can just simply move our cursor along and see what it looks like. That's okay. We can skip through the frames quickly using the step forward 1 frame or the step backwards 1 frame. Every time I click that, it'll show me the next keyframe. Or I can use the play button here, and that will quickly play through all of my frames and show me what it looks like. Okay. Or what I could do is I can click the play button up here, which will render my animation and it'll pop it out in a separate window and show me what it looks like. Now I don't need to render this because I've played through here and it's a little bit off. It's okay, but not all my movements are the same. And ideally, if we're doing something like this, and this is the specific style you're going for, you really want to have a set structure to your animation. You got to make sure that the movements between each frame is the same. Otherwise, your animation can come off looking choppy and it doesn't look good. That being said, there are some styles of animation where that is what you want, where you drop out certain frames to give that choppy motion to achieve a certain effect. That's not what we're going for. We're not trying to be overly artistic today. We just want a nice, smooth animation. And Adobe Animate has a handy tool built in that will allow us to get as close to that smooth animation as we want using frame by frame. It's called the onion skinning tool, and it's this one here, with the 2 circles next to each other. If I click this, this will show me the keyframe I'm currently on and the next 2 keyframes. If I move across one, it'll show me the previous keyframe, the current keyframe, and the next 2 keyframes, and so on and so on. And what this allows me to do is see where my object is at any point in time. And I can use this to bring in a smoother transition between objects. Okay, so I'm going to start there. First one, there's no problem with the first one. It's the beginning. I can't do much about that. The second one, okay, so let's try and add in, let's try and keep it at a set point every time. What I'm going to do, I'm going to move my circle up to so about roughly the middle. Okay, that'll help me. The next one, now I want to keep it the same. So you can see my first keyframe is this one at the top. My second keyframe is this next one. My third keyframe is the one that's highlighted. And then my fourth and fifth keyframes are down here. And you can already see that the gaps between them are all different, which would give me that choppy animation. I'm going to move this one up. I'm going to move it so that the top of my current keyframe touches the bottom of my first keyframe. And that's the gap we're going to keep every time. We'll see that as we go. Okay, so I'm happy with my third one now. I'm going to click on my fourth one. Fourth one is the highlighted one. The previous two are here. The next two are down here. I'm going to move this up and have the top of this one touching the bottom of the one before the previous one. And I'm going to keep doing this until I reach the bottom. Okay, keep adding them in, and you can see the benefit of the onion skinning tool. I can always see the previous keyframe, which helps me then with the current keyframe. And we've seen now, because I've changed the distance, I need to add more keyframes. That's fine. The onion skinning tool will stay where it is. It's not going to go away. The only time it goes away is if I click this again, and I'll get rid of it. I'll turn it off like so. Okay, I'm going to leave it there. I'm going to add a new keyframe. Because there's no frames after this one, I don't get any images for what comes next, because there isn't anything that comes next. And because this is a brand new one, remember, I've added a new keyframe, which means it copies everything from the previous keyframe and just brings it to this current keyframe. So I need to move this down. And when I move it down, you'll see here are my previous two frames, which is what we've been working with so far. I'm going to move that up like so. I'm going to add in another one, bring that down, and I'm going to add one more, and it's going to be at the bottom like so. Okay, what I can do now, I can take this back and play through this, and that's looking a little bit smoother now. Okay, I could go back and I could take a little bit more time to fluff it up and make it look a little prettier, but for now that'll do. Next thing we want to do is to bring in a little bit of realism. If you've ever watched a ball bounce at in slow motion, you will notice that as it hits the ground or whatever the surface is it's bouncing off of, the top layer continues to move for a split second while it catches up with the bottom layer. And that gives us this compressing effect. You see the ball compresses, it expands again and bounces. And to give my animation a bit of realism, I'm going to do that. I'm going to get my ball to compress a little bit. Let me just check I'm happy with these. I am. This is keyframe 10. That's when we hit the bottom. Okay. Keyframe 11 now is where our ball is going to start to compress. I'm going to add in a new keyframe, and this time I want to compress. It's not going to move anywhere. It's going to stay where it is because it's already hit the bottom, but I'm going to compress it slightly. And for this, I'm going to click on my free transform tool. I'm going to highlight my ball, and I'm going to use this one to just bring it down ever so slightly, like so. I'm not happy with that, so I'm going to highlight it again, compress it a little bit, and because it's compressed, it compresses it from both sides, which means I need to bring it down a little bit so it's still touching the bottom. Okay, I'm going to add another one, and I'm going to compress it again just a little bit more, maybe one, say two more. Move it down a little bit, and I'm happy with that. Okay, so I've got 12 frames now where my ball hits the floor, compresses, and then the next 12 frames will be the ball uncompressing and bouncing back to the top. And yes, I can go back, I can use the onion skinning tool, and I can replace each frame with the previous one until I've got my full animation. But we're using a digital tool. We want to ideally use this tool as much as possible. If I was having to do this freehand, if I was drawing this myself, or if I was animating this with clay or doing it in some other fashion, I would have to do that by hand. For example, if I was drawing, I would have to draw each page, and then have to draw the rest of them as they go back to the top. But since we're doing this digitally, I can use the program to my advantage, because the next 12 frames is just going to be the previous 12 frames, but done in reverse, i.e. it's going to be this. We have this where it goes from the top to the bottom. The next 12 frames will be going from the bottom to the top. And I've already done all that work. I don't want to do it again. What I'm going to do is I'm going to click on the first frame, and I'm going to highlight all 12 of my frames. I'm going to right click now, and I'm going to click copy. Then I'm going to click on the next empty frame, which is frame number 13. Number 12 is here, which is where my ball stops. 13 is empty at the moment. I'm going to click there, then right click. I'm going to paste frames. And now what you'll see is I have 12 frames starting at the top till it hits the bottom. And then frame number 13 starts at the top again and moves its way down to the bottom. It's not what I want. I want it to go the other way. I want it in reverse, which means I'm going to find frame 13. And you notice that these frames are all numbered 1 to 5, or 5, 10, 15, 20, and so on are numbered for you. The ones in the middle, once you have lots of keyframes or lots of frames, it can be hard to keep track of. But if you just click any one, the number here will tell you exactly what frame that is. I'm looking for frame 13, which is this one. I'm going to click and drag along again. So highlight all 12 of these frames, and now I'm going to right click. I'm not going to copy this time. What I'm going to do is I'm going to reverse frames. Now what I've done, I created 12 frames myself, and I've let the machine, I've let the computer, and I've let the program create the other 12 and flip them around for me. I could have done that myself, but animation is already a time-consuming process. So where we can make technology do the work for us, we might as well let it. And now what I have is an animation where my ball falls. Actually, let me turn off onion skin so we can see this a little bit better. To turn it off, I just click here, and now I scrub through. It falls, it falls, it falls, it bounces, and it goes back to the top, like so. Okay, I can click the play button here to see it again. And there we go. We can see there's that small compression as we bounce, and it just adds a little bit of realism to my animation. And again, I can click the play button up here to render it and to give me my animation in a separate window. Once I'm happy with it and I want to publish it, I can quickly publish it by clicking the quick share up here. I can click there and I can share social media or publish as a GIF or HTML file or a video. Then just click publish, or I can click file and I can export it as a video or a media or a GIF. Okay, I'm not going to do that right now. We'll do that. We'll cover how to do that in later videos. For now, what I am going to do is I'm going to make sure I can save this. So if I do want to come back to it at a later date, I can. I'm going to click File, Save As, and I'm going to call this Bouncing Ball. And I already have one called Bouncing Ball, so I'm going to call this one Bouncing Ball 1. Save. And what that does, it doesn't export anything. It doesn't save my animation as a video or a GIF. It saves my workspace. Everything I have here, my timeline set up as it is, my tools and my properties libraries on the right hand side, that's all set up as it is. If I open that, it will open up Adobe Animate for me and show me exactly what I have here. If I want to publish it, I need to either click up here or File, Export, and so on. But like I said, we'll cover that in later videos. So thank you very much for listening, and we'll see you in the next one.